June 16th, 1943, 0530 hours. A concrete room in occupied France. Erich von Steinberg woke to darkness. The alarm clock had not rung, did not need to. His body had learned to wake 30 minutes before dawn regardless of the season. 3 years of military discipline had trained reflexes deeper than conscious thought. He sat up, felt the cold air against his face. The room held a narrow bed, a wooden desk, a single chair, a footlocker. Officers' quarters, better than enlisted barracks, still Spartan, still temporary. Everything about this war felt temporary except the dying. Erich was 29 years old, had been 26 when Germany invaded Poland, had spent 3 years in fighters. First over England during the Battle of Britain, then over the Channel, then France, then everywhere. The war had spread like cancer through Europe, and Erich had followed it. 31 confirmed victories, Oberleutnant rank, veteran status, survivor. He lit the oil lamp on his desk. Electric power was unreliable. The generator ran only during operational hours. He opened the desk drawer and removed writing paper. Good paper was difficult to find now. Everything was difficult to find, but Anna deserved letters on proper paper. He uncapped his fountain pen, began to write. My dearest Anna, another morning begins. The weather is clear. We expect operations today. I cannot tell you more than this. The censors would remove it anyway. I think of you constantly, of our child growing inside you. 5 months now. In 4 months, I will be a father. This thought sustains me through difficult days. I hope the food situation has improved in Stuttgart. I hope you are eating enough. I hope... He stopped. Put down the pen. What did he hope? That the war would end, that Germany would win, that individual hope mattered at all in a conflict this enormous. He finished the letter with pleasantries, sealed the envelope, addressed it carefully. Anna Steinberg, apartment 3B, Schillerstrasse 47, Stuttgart, Germany. The address was more real to him than his current location. This airfield had no permanent name, just a designation. Jägerkommando West, Fighter Command West, temporary, replaceable, like everything else. Erich dressed, Luftwaffe uniform, flight suit over the uniform, leather jacket, boots. He checked his personal items, identification papers, sold book, military passbook, wallet containing a photograph of Anna, taken on their wedding day in 1940. She had been 23, smiling, beautiful, unaware that her husband would spend their marriage living in concrete rooms 500 kilometers away. Outside, the June morning was cool, not cold. The summer warmth had not yet arrived. Erich walked across the grass airfield toward the operations building. Other pilots were emerging from their quarters, silent figures in the pre-dawn gray. No one spoke much before missions, nothing to say that had not been said 1,000 times. The operations building was wooden, temporary, built by forced labor in 1941. The briefing room held 20 chairs arranged in rows facing a chalkboard. 16 chairs were occupied. 4 pilots had been killed in the past 2 weeks. The empty chairs remained. No one sat in them. Superstition or respect? Erich did not know which. Major Hoffman entered, 42 years old, career officer, had commanded this squadron since 1940. A veteran of the previous war, had flown biplanes over France in 1918, now commanded men flying aircraft that would have seemed like science fiction 25 years ago. The pace of aviation advancement was staggering, terrifying. Gentlemen, Hoffman's voice carried command authority. Today's mission is sector patrol. We have reports of American fighter activity, P-47 Thunderbolts operating between 2,000 and 3,000 meters altitude. Hoffman pointed to the chalkboard. Someone had drawn a crude map. France, the Channel, sector boundaries marked in chalk. Intelligence assessment. The P-47 is heavy, 7 tons fully loaded, built for ground attack rather than air combat. Slow in turns, poor climb rate. If engaged, standard tactics apply. Climb to altitude advantage. Dive attack. Disengage if opponent attempts to extend combat. Erich listened, took mental notes. The intelligence on P-47s had been consistent for months, heavy, clumsy, easy targets for experienced pilots. Erich had not encountered one yet, had no reason to doubt the intelligence assessment. German intelligence had been accurate about Spitfires, about Hurricanes. No reason to think they were wrong about American fighters. Weather is clear, visibility unlimited. Takeoff at 0830. Questions. No one spoke. What questions were there? The mission was routine. Patrol, engage if encountered. Return, repeat tomorrow. Dismissed. Prepare your aircraft. Eric walked to the dispersal area. His BF-109G6 sat in its revetment, a U-shaped earthwork barrier designed to protect parked aircraft from strafing attacks. The fighter looked predatory even when stationary. Sleek, angular, purpose-built for killing. He walked around the aircraft, performed his pre-flight inspection. Visual check of control surfaces. No damage visible. Fuel tanks full. Ammunition loaded. 700 rounds total. 200 rounds for the centerline MPH 151 20mm cannon. 500 rounds split between two MG-131 13mm machine guns. The ground crew chief approached. Werner Kessler, 61 years old, civilian contractor, had maintained aircraft since before the Great War. His hands were permanently stained with oil, carbonum, and hydraulic fluid. His face was lined with 60 years of life and 3 years of war. She is ready, Herr Oberleutnant. Everything checks perfectly. Thank you, Werner. Any issues I should know about? Werner hesitated, glanced around, lowered his voice. The fuel quality is not what it should be. I can smell the impurities. The engine will run, but not at full rated power. How much power loss? Perhaps 10%, perhaps 15%. Difficult to say exactly. Eric filed this information away. 10% power loss meant the engine was producing 325 horsepower instead of the rated 475. Not catastrophic, but not optimal either. Can anything be done? Werner shook his head. The fuel comes from the synthetic plants. They are doing their best with what they have. We use what we receive. Eric nodded, climbed into the cockpit, settled into the seat. The cockpit was cramped, efficient, everything within reach. Instruments clustered on the panel, airspeed indicator, altimeter, artificial horizon, engine temperature, oil pressure, fuel gauge, ammunition counters, radio controls, gun sight, every dial and switch memorized. Could operate them blind if necessary. He strapped in, 5-point harness, parachute already attached to his back, life vest already worn. If the aircraft was hit and caught fire, Eric would have perhaps 10 seconds to release the harness slide, the canopy back, stand up, and roll over the side. 10 seconds between life and death. He had practiced the motion hundreds of times. Muscle memory. At 0825, he started the engine. The Daimler-Benz DB605A coughed, caught, settled into a rough idle. 475 horsepower in theory, perhaps 325 in reality. The propeller turned. 3 blades. Variable pitch. Black paint on the tips to increase visibility. At 0830, Eric taxied onto the grass runway. 2 other aircraft followed. Klaus Hofmeister on the left, 19 years old, 47 hours of combat experience. Franz Dietrich on the right, 21 years old, 53 hours. Both competent, both young, both convinced they would survive because they were skilled. Eric had been the same at their age, had believed skill mattered. Experience had taught him that luck mattered more. Luck and mathematics, but mostly mathematics. He advanced the throttle. The engine roared. 325 horsepower, pushing 400 kilograms of aircraft forward. The tail came up. Airspeed built, 100 kilometers per hour. 120, 140. The aircraft lifted off at 150 kilometers per hour. Gear retracted. Flaps retracted. Climb power. Rate of climb 15 meters per second. The formation climbed southeast, away from the sunrise, away from the British coast, toward the patrol sector. At 3,000 meters, Eric leveled off. The air was thinner here, colder. The oxygen mask felt tight against his face. The rubber had hardened in the cold. The seal was imperfect. He could taste the metallic bite of high-altitude air, mixing with recycled breath inside the mask. A familiar discomfort. Tolerable. Klaus and Franz held formation, proper spacing, proper altitude separation. Both had learned well, both followed instructions. Both would probably die anyway because following instructions was not sufficient protection against bad luck or superior force. The radio crackled. Adler Flight, this is Grief Control, Vector 270 Angels 8, single contact type unknown heading northwest. Eric keyed his transmit switch. Grief Control, Adler 1. Understood. Angels 8, heading northwest. Request identification on contact. Negative Adler 1. Contact is alone. No escort visible. Single aircraft, no escort. either separated from formation or experiencing mechanical difficulty. Either way, vulnerable. Eric scanned the horizon. His eyes had learned to detect movement against static background. Training. Practice. 3 years of searching empty sky for small dark shapes that wanted to kill him. There, bearing 285 degrees, distance approximately 4 kilometers, altitude lower, perhaps 400 meters. The silhouette was wrong for British fighters, too large, too thick. The wings were straight rather than elliptical, not a Spitfire, not a Hurricane, P-47 Thunderbolt. Definitely. Eric felt professional interest, not excitement, not fear, just clinical assessment. This would be his first engagement with the American type. Intelligence said they were easy targets. He would verify this assessment personally. Adler 2, Adler 3, I have contact bearing 285 Angels 8. Follow my lead. We climb to advantage position, then attack from above. Klaus acknowledged. Franz acknowledged. Both eager, both confident. Eric increased throttle, began climbing. 3,000 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters. The altimeter unwound steadily. The engine temperature rose slightly. Normal. The Daimler-Benz could maintain this power output indefinitely. Theoretically. At 4,000 meters, Eric leveled off. He was now 1,600 meters above the P-47. Massive altitude advantage. Convertible to speed. Speed convertible to successful attack. The mathematics were simple. Height equals energy. Energy equals options. Options equals survival. The P-47 continued northwest, apparently unaware. Either the pilot had not seen them or had seen them and was unconcerned. The first option suggested incompetence. The second suggested foolishness. Both suggested easy victory. Eric pushed the control stick forward gently. The nose dropped below the horizon. The aircraft began to accelerate. Gravity assisting the engine. 320 kilometers per hour. 350, 380. The dive angle was 30 degrees below horizontal, optimal for this type of attack. Fast enough to close quickly. Shallow enough to maintain control authority. 420 kilometers per hour. 450, 480. The distance to the P-47 collapsed rapidly. 4 kilometers became 3, became 2. Eric's thumb rested on the firing button. Not yet, wait for optimal range. The MG 150-120 cannon was effective to 800 meters but accurate only inside 300 meters. Patience, discipline, wait. 520 kilometers per hour, 550, 580. The wind noise increased. The airframe began to vibrate. Normal, expected. The BF-109 was designed for high-speed dives, could handle 770 kilometers per hour before structural concerns became critical. Eric was well within limits. Distance 200 meters. Still closing. The P-47 grew larger in his gun sight. Individual panel lines became visible. The American star insignia on the wings was clear. White star, blue circle, red, white, blue stripes on the rudder. Fresh paint, new aircraft. The American production system delivering new fighters to replace losses. Distance 800 meters, 600 meters, 400 meters. Then the P-47 pushed its nose down. Eric's first reaction was confusion. The American was diving, away from the engagement, surrendering altitude. This violated every principle of aerial combat Eric had learned. Altitude was defensive capability. Altitude was energy reserve. Altitude was life. A pilot who voluntarily dove away from an attacker in a superior position had accepted defeat. His second reaction was tactical opportunity. The P-47 was diving. Eric was already diving. Simple geometry. Match the angle. Close the distance. Fire when in range. The engagement would be over in seconds. Eric pushed the stick forward. Steeper angle. 45 degrees now, maximum acceleration. The engine screamed. The propeller bit into thin air. The aircraft dropped like a stone. 600 kilometers per hour. 650, 700. The P-47 continued diving, steeper than Eric. At least 50 degrees, nose down. Possibly 60, an aggressive angle, nearly vertical. Reckless? Eric followed. His airspeed continued building. 720 kilometers per hour. 740. The control stick felt heavier. Aerodynamic forces loading the control surfaces increased with the square of velocity. Small movements required significant force. This was normal, expected. Eric had experienced high-speed flight hundreds of times. 750 kilometers per hour, 760. The distance was not closing. This registered as unexpected. Eric was diving. The P-47 was diving. Eric's aircraft was lighter, should be faster, should be gaining, but the distance remained constant. 600 meters separation, not closing, not opening, just constant. 770 kilometers per hour. Eric was now at the absolute limit. The BF-109G6 maximum permissible dive speed was 770 kilometers per hour. Beyond this speed, structural integrity became compromised. The wings would flutter. The control surfaces would lock. The fuselage would twist. Continue beyond 770 and the aircraft would disintegrate. This was not theory. This was engineering reality. The airframe was designed to specific stress limits. Exceed those limits and metal failed. Physics did not negotiate. The control stick was now extremely heavy. Eric needed both hands to maintain control. The airframe was shaking continuously. The wings were flexing. The wingtips bent upward under aerodynamic loading. The entire aircraft felt on the edge of catastrophic failure. The P-47 was pulling away. This was impossible. Eric watched the American fighter accelerate past 800 kilometers per hour, then 850. The distance between aircraft began to widen. 600 meters became 700, became 800. The P-47 was faster, significantly faster, not marginally, fundamentally. Eric's right hand tightened on the control stick. His logical mind understood the situation clearly. He was at maximum speed. The opponent was faster than maximum speed. Closing the gap was physically impossible. Continuing the dive risked structural failure. The correct action was obvious. Pull out, recover to level flight, return to base. Right report. But 3 years of combat had built instincts that bypassed logic. Instincts that insisted on pressing attacks, on never surrendering, on winning through aggression and commitment. Those instincts screamed at him to continue, to push harder, to refuse defeat. Eric held the dive for 3 more seconds. 770 kilometers per hour. The airframe shook violently. The wingtips flexed dangerously. The rivets attaching wingskin to internal framework groaned under stress, approaching design limits. The aircraft was seconds from coming apart. He pulled back on the stick. Both hands, maximum force. The nose came up slowly. The G-forces built. 2 times normal gravity. 3 times. 4 times. Eric's body weight increased proportionally. At 4G, his 80-kilogram body weighed 320 kilograms. The blood pooled in his legs. His vision began to gray at the edges. 5G, 6G, his vision tunneled. Peripheral vision disappeared. Only the center remained. The instrument panel, the horizon line, nothing else visible. 7G, the absolute limit. Beyond 7G, human consciousness failed. Eric was at the edge, holding on through muscle memory and desperation. The BF-109 transitioned from dive to level flight at 500 meters altitude. Eric eased the stick forward. The G-forces reduced. 6G, 5G, 4G. His vision expanded. Blood returned to his brain. He could see again. His airspeed was bleeding off rapidly. 650 kilometers per hour. 550, 450. Kinetic energy converting to altitude recovery. The aircraft climbed slightly. 600 meters altitude, 700 meters. Then leveled off. Eric looked up through the canopy, searching for the peep, and found it immediately. The American fighter was climbing, already at 200 meters altitude, then 400 meters, then 600 meters. Above Eric now. The altitude advantage had reversed completely. The P-47 climbed at an angle Eric had never witnessed. 45 degrees, 50 degrees. The massive radial engine hauling 7 tons of aircraft vertically upward, as if mass and gravity were irrelevant. The kinetic energy from the dive converted to potential energy with perfect efficiency. Eric leveled off at 800 meters. His airspeed stabilized at 400 kilometers per hour. He was low, slow, vulnerable. The P-47 was high, fast, dominant. The engagement had lasted 90 seconds. From initial dive to final separation. 90 seconds. In those 90 seconds, Eric had fired 0 rounds, had achieved 0 hits, had never been in a position of advantage, had never threatened his opponent even slightly. Complete defeat. Total, absolute, unambiguous. Klaus's voice crackled through the radio. Young, confused. Adler, what happened? Did you hit him? Oh. Eric did not respond immediately, was performing calculations. The P-47 had achieved 880 kilometers per hour in the dive. The BF-109 maximum was 770 kilometers per hour. Difference 110 kilometers per hour, 14% faster. But this number understated the problem. The real issue was not speed. The real issue was structural integrity. The P-47 at 880 kilometers per hour had pulled out smoothly. No shuddering, no difficulty. The pilot had simply pulled back on the stick and the aircraft had responded instantly. As if 880 kilometers per hour was comfortable, normal, well within design parameters. The Bf-109 at 770 kilometers per hour had been on the edge of structural failure. The airframe shaking, the wings flexing dangerously. Another 10 kilometers per hour would have caused catastrophic failure. This meant the American fighter had been designed for speeds the Bf-109 could not safely achieve. The margin was enormous. Not small, not tactical, fundamental. Adler 2, Adler 3 returned to base. Standard formation. Klaus's voice carried uncertainty. But Adler 1, should we pursue, the American is, return to base, now. The flight back took 17 minutes. Eric flew mechanically. Throttle settings, altitude maintenance, navigation, all automatic. His conscious mind was elsewhere, processing implications. If the P-47 could outdive the Bf-109, then diving attack was ineffective. The fundamental German tactical doctrine, climb to advantage, dive to attack, did not work against this opponent. What alternative existed? Turning battle. The Bf-109 could outturn the P-47. Intelligence reports confirmed this. The American fighter was too heavy, too large. In sustained turning combat at lower altitude, German fighters held advantage. But turning combat required both aircraft to turn. What if the P-47 refused? What if the American pilot simply dove away whenever attacked? The Bf-109 could not follow. The engagement would end with separation. No victory, no defeat, just stalemate. Stalemate was unacceptable. Stalemate meant American bombers could operate without effective opposition. Stalemate meant Germany lost air superiority. Stalemate meant Germany lost the war. The mathematics were simple, brutal, inescapable. Eric landed at 09:47 hours, taxied to his revetment, shutdown checklist. Magnetos off, fuel selector off, master switch off. The Daimler-Benz engine coughed twice, then fell silent. The propeller coasted to a stop. He sat in the cockpit, not moving, just breathing. The June morning sun had climbed higher. Temperature at ground level was pleasant, comfortable. Birds sang in trees beyond the airfield perimeter. The world continuing as if nothing significant had happened. But something had happened. Something fundamental had changed. Klaus and Franz were already climbing down from their aircraft, both walking toward Eric's revetment, both expecting debriefing, both expecting explanation. Eric unstrapped his harness, removed his oxygen mask, removed his leather helmet, climbed down from the wing. His legs felt disconnected, neural signals traveling through thick fluid, delayed, uncertain. Klaus reached him first, eager, curious. Herr Oberleutnant, what happened? Why did the American dive like that? Eric looked at Klaus, 19 years old. 47 hours combat experience. Still believed courage and skill determined outcomes. Still believed German fighters were superior. Still believed victory was possible through proper tactics. He dove because diving works, Eric said quietly. Franz frowned. But you taught us never to surrender altitude. You said altitude is life. I was wrong. Both wingmen stared. The statement was incomprehensible. Erich von Steinberg did not admit mistakes. 31 victories did not happen through bad judgment. But Eric had just said he was wrong. The P-47 can dive faster than we can, Eric continued. Much faster. We cannot follow. We cannot engage. Once the American pilot pushes forward on his control stick, the fight is over. We have lost. But surely we can, Klaus began. We can do nothing. The physics are absolute. Their aircraft is faster in dives, stronger in structure, more powerful in engine. These are not tactical problems. These are mathematical realities. Eric walked past them toward the operations building. Behind him, Klaus and Franz exchanged glances. Confused, uncertain, their certainty beginning to crack. In the operations room, Eric sat at a wooden table, pulled out the standard combat report form, began writing, time, location, enemy type, outcome. He wrote carefully, precisely, no interpretation, just facts. Your 8:47 hours, 4,000 meters altitude, engaged single P-47 Thunderbolt. Enemy aircraft dove to escape, unable to follow. Maximum dive speed estimated 880 kilometers per hour. Bf-109 G6 maximum dive speed 770 kilometers per hour. Gap 110 kilometers per hour. Enemy aircraft recovered from dive at 400 meters altitude with no apparent structural stress. Enemy aircraft climbed to altitude superior to own position. No shots fired, no damage inflicted. Engagement duration 90 seconds. He paused. The form had a section for tactical assessment. One line, space for brief comment. Eric considered what to write. Considered the truth versus what would be accepted. He wrote, P-47 Thunderbolt cannot be engaged using standard diving attack profile. Recommend immediate review of all tactical doctrine regarding American fighter types. He signed the report, dated it, filed it in the operations box for Major Hoffman to review. The report would go up the chain, someone would read it, someone would dismiss it as anomaly, as single engagement, as insufficient data for doctrine change. Eric knew this, knew his report would be ignored, but he had documented the truth, had done his duty. What happened next was beyond his control. That evening, Eric sat in his quarters. The sun was setting, orange light through the single window. He had writing paper on the desk, had intended to write another letter to Anna, but the words would not come. What could he tell her? That he had encountered an opponent he could not defeat, that German fighters might be obsolete, that the mathematics of war had shifted against Germany. These thoughts would only create worry, would serve no purpose. He wrote instead about small things: weather, food, routine maintenance, safe topics, comfortable lies. But after signing the letter, he pulled out additional paper, began writing a different letter, a letter he would not send, a letter that told truth. My dearest Anna, today I learned that courage is not enough, that skill is not enough, that experience is not enough. I engaged an American fighter. I attempted to shoot it down. I failed completely, not because I was afraid, not because I lacked skill. I failed because the American aircraft is superior to mine in ways that make skill irrelevant. This frightens me more than enemy bullets. Bullets can be avoided through maneuver. Physics cannot be avoided at all. I love you. I love our unborn child. I will do everything possible to survive and return to you. But I am no longer certain that everything possible is sufficient. The war has changed. I am not certain we understand how much. Always yours, Eric. He folded this letter, locked it in his footlocker with his personal items. Letters he would never send. Truth he could not share. Knowledge that was useless except as burden. Outside his window, the sun disappeared below the horizon. Darkness spread across occupied France. Stars appeared, distant, cold, indifferent to the struggles of men and machines and nations. Eric lay on his narrow bed, stared at the ceiling. Sleep was impossible. His mind replayed the engagement endlessly, searching for the mistake, the moment he could have acted differently, some tactic that would have changed the outcome. He found nothing. The P-47 pilot had made one decision: push the stick forward. Everything that followed had been physics, not tactics, not skill. Just mathematics. F equals ma. Force equals mass times acceleration. Structural stress equals load divided by cross-sectional area. Dive speed equals engine power minus drag. Simple equations, brutal answers. Somewhere in Germany, engineers were designing improved fighters, more powerful engines, better armament, refined aerodynamics. They were doing their best with materials and manufacturing capacity available. Somewhere in America, engineers were also designing fighters with more materials, more manufacturing capacity, more everything. The mathematics were shifting. Eric could feel it, like standing on a beach and feeling the tide change. The water receding, the current reversing, inevitable, unstoppable. Erich von Steinberg had 31 confirmed victories, would eventually accumulate 87, would survive the war, would live to old age, would write a memoir titled Physics Does Not Negotiate. But all of that was future. Tonight, on June 16, 1943, he was 29 years old, lying in darkness, understanding for the first time that individual excellence might not be sufficient, understanding that systems were more important than men, understanding that courage could not defeat mathematics. This understanding would haunt him for the remaining 39 years of his life, would inform every decision, every judgment, every moment of clarity and despair. But tonight it was just new, just painful, just true. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent, eternal, witnesses to countless wars, countless victories and defeats. The stars had seen empires rise and fall, had seen brave men die for lost causes, had seen mathematics crush hope with perfect efficiency. The stars knew. Eric was only beginning to learn. The BF-109G6 sat in its revetment, metal and fabric and engineering, a magnificent aircraft, beautifully designed, responsive, purpose-built. Everything German engineering could achieve in 1943, it was not enough, would never be enough. And that was the truth that Erich von Steinberg carried into sleep, the truth that would define the rest of the war, the rest of his life. Physics does not negotiate. 3 days later, Eric stood at attention in Major Hoffman's office. The office was spare, functional, concrete walls, single desk, filing cabinets, maps pinned to boards, photographs from earlier campaigns, Spitfires burning, hurricane wreckage, victories from 1940 when the Luftwaffe had ruled the skies, when German pilots had been invincible, when the future had seemed certain. Hoffman sat behind the desk, held Eric's combat report, had been reading it for several minutes. His expression was unreadable. "Your report," Hoffman said finally. His voice carried careful neutrality. "You state that the P-47 cannot be engaged using diving attack. You recommend reviewing all tactical doctrine." "Yes, Herr Major." "Based on one encounter, 90 seconds, one enemy aircraft." "Yes, Herr Major." Hoffman set down the report, looked directly at Eric. "These are significant conclusions, Oberleutnant. You are suggesting that our fundamental approach to air combat is flawed, that 3 years of proven tactics are obsolete, that we must rebuild our doctrine from first principles." Eric recognized the trap. Hoffman was not asking whether the report was accurate, was asking whether Eric understood the implications of being correct. If Eric was right, then every pilot in the Luftwaffe needed retraining. Every tactical manual needed revision. Every commander needed to admit that they had been wrong. The institutional resistance to this admission would be enormous. "I understand the implications, Herr Major. I am reporting what I observed. The P-47 achieved 880 kilometers per hour in a dive. Our maximum rated speed is 770. The gap is 110 kilometers per hour. That is not marginal. That is fundamental." Hoffman leaned back in his chair. "Perhaps your airspeed indicator was faulty. Instruments fail, especially under combat stress. My instrument readings were consistent throughout the dive, Herr Major. The aircraft behavior confirmed the speed. The structural stress was approaching limits. Perhaps the P-47 was damaged, diving uncontrollably. You did not observe the aircraft afterward. You cannot know if it survived. The pilot recovered smoothly at 400 meters, Herr Major. The aircraft climbed to 600 meters with no visible difficulty. The maneuver appeared routine, practiced." Hoffman stood, walked to the window, looked out at the airfield. "Oberleutnant, I understand your concern, but I cannot circulate this report to other squadrons based on a single engagement. Other pilots need confidence in our tactics, need to believe in their aircraft, need to maintain aggressive spirit. Maintaining aggressive spirit against superior force leads to unnecessary casualties, Herr Major." Hoffman turned, his expression hardened. "Are you suggesting that German pilots lack courage, that we should adopt defensive postures, that we should cede air superiority because one American fighter escaped one engagement?" Eric recognized this was no longer a tactical discussion. Was now about morale, about belief systems, about narratives that held units together. Truth was secondary to cohesion. "I am suggesting that we adapt our tactics to match enemy capabilities, Herr Major. That is not cowardice, that is professionalism." "Your recommendation is noted." Hoffman's tone indicated the conversation was ending. "I will file your report, but I will not circulate it. We cannot afford to undermine confidence based on insufficient data." "How much data is sufficient, Herr Major? How many pilots must die learning what I learned?" Hoffman's eyes narrowed. "That is not your decision to make, Oberleutnant. You fly your missions. You file your reports. I make decisions about doctrine and training. Is that understood?" "Yes, Herr Major." "You are dismissed." Eric saluted, about-faced, walked from the office. In the corridor, he stopped, placed his hand against the cool concrete wall, felt the solid reality, the immovable structure. Hoffman had called it insufficient data. Eric knew it was sufficient understanding, but understanding without authority was useless. Cassandra in Troy, speaking truth, being ignored, watching disaster approach. He walked to the maintenance hangar, found Werner Kessler inspecting a damaged wing panel, The old mechanic looked up as Eric approached. Herr Oberleutnant, how can I help you? Werner, I need technical information about the DB605A engine. What power is it actually producing? Werner set down his tools, glanced around the hangar. Other mechanics were working on various aircraft. Out of earshot, he gestured toward a small office. They entered. Werner closed the door. Why do you ask? Werner's voice was quiet, careful. Because I need to know the truth, not the specifications, the reality. Werner was silent for a moment, then sighed. The DB605A is rated at 1475 horsepower under optimal conditions. Perfect fuel, correct mixture, all systems functioning perfectly. We achieved those numbers in 1941, in 1942, in early 1943. And now we are getting 200 horsepower, sometimes 150, on bad days 100. Eric felt something cold settle in his chest. That is 80% of rated power. Why? Werner walked to a workbench, picked up a glass beaker containing amber liquid, held it toward Eric. Smell this. Eric took the beaker. The smell was wrong. Aviation gasoline should have clean, sharp scent. This fuel smelled burnt. Chemical, like coal tar mixed with industrial solvents. Synthetic fuel, Werner explained, made from coal through hydrogenation. The Burgess process. We are running out of petroleum sources. The refineries are being bombed. The production capacity is dropping. So we make fuel from coal. But the process is imperfect. How imperfect? The octane rating is lower than spec. The combustion is incomplete. Carbon builds up in cylinders. Engines run hot. Power output drops. We adjust timing. We enrich mixtures. We do everything possible. But there are limits to compensation. Can the fuel quality improve? Werner's expression answered before his words. The refineries continue to be bombed. The synthetic plants continue to be sabotaged. The workers, he stopped, started again. Many workers are forced labor now, prisoners. They sabotage when they can. Small things, nothing obvious, but cumulative. A valve left slightly open, a filter not properly cleaned. The fuel quality degrades every month. Eric performed calculations mentally. If German engines produced 1,200 horsepower actual versus 1,475 rated, and American engines produced their rated power, he needed American engine specifications. Werner, what do you know about the American R2800 engine, the one that powers the P-47? Only what intelligence reports say. 2,000 horsepower at sea level. Turbo supercharger maintains power to high altitude. With water methanol injection for emergency power, perhaps 2,400 horsepower, perhaps more. Eric did the mathematics. 2,000 horsepower versus 1,200 horsepower actual German output. Not a 20% advantage, a 67% advantage. With water injection, possibly 2 to 800 horsepower. That would be a 133% advantage, more than double. Thank you, Werner. This conversation stays between us. There is nothing to discuss, Herr Oberleutnant, just an old man complaining about fuel quality. But it was not just fuel quality. It was systems failure. The entire German petroleum infrastructure was collapsing under sustained Allied bombing. Refineries destroyed, synthetic plants sabotaged, supply lines interdicted, each component failing. The cumulative effect catastrophic. Individual German pilots could not compensate for systematic infrastructure failure. Skill could not overcome fuel shortage. Courage could not repair bombed factories. The mathematics were brutal. That evening, Eric wrote another unsent letter to Anna. My dear Anna, I spoke with Major Hoffman today. I tried to explain what we face. He refused to listen, called my assessment insufficient data. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps one encounter is insufficient evidence. But I spoke with our maintenance chief, learned that our engines are producing 80% of rated power due to fuel quality problems. The Americans may be producing full rated power, or more. If this is true, then we are fighting with handicapped aircraft. Not slightly handicapped. Fundamentally handicapped. Every performance characteristic suffers proportionally. I do not know how to win under these conditions. I am not certain anyone knows. Perhaps that is why Hoffman refuses to listen. Because listening means admitting we cannot win. And military organizations cannot function on admitted impossibility. I think about you constantly, about our child, about coming home. But home feels very distant now. You're Eric. He locked the letter in his footlocker, lay on his bed, stared at the ceiling, calculated force ratios and power outputs and fuel consumption rates until sleep finally arrived. June became July. July became August. Eric flew missions, encountered P-47s 3 more times. Each encounter followed the same pattern. German fighters attempted diving attack. American fighters dove away. German fighters could not follow. Engagements ended in stalemate, no victories, no defeats, just separation. The pattern confirmed Eric's initial assessment. The P-47 could not be effectively engaged using standard German tactics. But Major Hoffman continued to insist that more data was needed, that pilots needed better training, that aggressive spirit would overcome technical disadvantage. July 23, 1943, mission number 5 against P-47s. Eric led a 4-aircraft flight. Klaus Hofmeister, Franz Dietrich, and a new pilot named Dieter Braun, 20 years old, 73 hours total combat time, energetic, enthusiastic, believed in German invincibility the way young pilots always did before reality taught otherwise. The mission briefing was routine. Patrol Sector 7, altitude 3,000 meters, engage enemy fighters if encountered, standard procedures, standard expectations. They encountered 8 P-47s at 11:23 hours. The Americans were at 2,800 meters altitude. Eric's flight had slight altitude advantage, 200 meters. Enough to matter, enough for initial attack. Adler flight attack from above. Do not follow if they dive. Maintain altitude discipline. Is that understood? All 3 pilots acknowledged. Klaus and Franz had flown with Eric before. Understood his caution. Dieter was new, hearing the instructions for the first time, probably not believing them. Eric selected the nearest P-47, rolled inverted, pulled through, began diving, 30-degree angle, building speed, 550 kilometers per hour, 600. The P-47 grew larger in his gun sight, range decreasing. 800 meters, 600, 400. The P-47 dove away. Standard response. Eric pulled out of his attack, climbed back to 3,000 meters, watched the American disappear below. Discipline, exactly as briefed. Klaus attacked next. Different P-47. Same result. The American dove. Klaus pulled out. Climbed. Maintained discipline. Franz attacked. His P-47 also dove. Franz pulled out. Climbed. 3 attempts. 3 escapes. No victories, but no losses either. Acceptable outcome given force ratios. Then Dieter attacked. His target dove. Dieter followed. Adler 4 break off. Return to altitude. Dieter's voice came through the radio. Young, excited. I can catch him, Adler 1. He is slowing. Negative, Adler 4. The P-47 is not slowing. You are entering flak range. Break off now. But Dieter continued. The target fixation was absolute. He had found an enemy. Was pursuing. Every instinct said press the attack. Eric's warnings were just caution. Just fear. Just cowardice. Dieter descended through 2,000 meters. Below this altitude, ground-based anti-aircraft became effective. Allied doctrine positioned flak batteries to cover probable engagement zones. German doctrine was to remain above 2,000 meters over contested territory. Below that altitude, friendly and enemy flak killed indiscriminately. Adler 4, you are at 1,800 meters. Pull up immediately. No response. Dieter had either turned off his radio or was ignoring it. His Bf-109 continued diving. 1,600 meters, 1,400 meters, 1,200 meters. Chasing a P-47 that was pulling away. Chasing a target he would never catch. Eric saw the flak bursts. Black flowers blooming against blue sky. Multiple batteries firing. 20 millimeter, 37 millimeter, 88 millimeter. The gunners had acquired a target. Were bracketing altitude and lead. Mathematics. Trajectory calculations. Death delivered through ballistic precision. Adler 4 flak burst at your altitude. Pull up now. The shell detonated at 100 meters. Proximity fuse. Designed to explode when passing within 15 meters of aircraft. The shrapnel spread in a cone. Thousands of metal fragments. Each piece capable of penetrating aluminum skin, severing control cables, puncturing fuel tanks. The fragments hit Dieter's Bf-109 along the left side, severed the aileron control cables, punctured the left fuel tank, penetrated the cockpit. Dieter was probably killed instantly. The aircraft rolled left, continued rolling. The left wing failed under aerodynamic loading, separated. The fuselage tumbled. Impact occurred 3 seconds later. No parachute deployed. Dieter Braun was dead. Had been dead since the shrapnel entered the cockpit. The crash was just formality. Klaus's voice, quiet, shocked. Adler, one Dieter is down. I see it, Adler 2, reform on me. We returned to base. The flight back took 22 minutes. No one spoke. The radio remained silent, each pilot alone with thoughts. Klaus and Franz had witnessed what happened when you ignored instructions, when you believed courage was sufficient, when you chased targets beyond your capability to catch. At debriefing, Major Hoffman listened to Eric's report, made notes, asked questions. Dieter disobeyed altitude discipline. Yes, Herr Major. He descended below 2,000 meters despite explicit orders. Yes, Herr Major. And was killed by anti-aircraft fire. Yes, Herr Major. Hoffman closed his notebook. Tragic, but instructive. Dieter's death was caused by failure to follow orders, not by enemy superiority, not by tactical failure, by individual indiscipline. This will be emphasized in my report. Eric understood. If Dieter died from disobeying orders, then the problem was individual rather than systematic. The tactics remained valid. The doctrine remained sound. Only the pilot had failed. Yes, Herr Major, I will emphasize discipline in my report. Good. Dismissed. Eric walked from the briefing room. Klaus and Franz were waiting outside. Both looked shaken. Both had just learned what every combat pilot eventually learns, that you can do everything correctly and still die, that the margin between survival and death is arbitrary, that luck matters more than skill. Was it our fault? Klaus asked quietly. Should we have stayed with him? No, Eric said. Dieter made his own choice. We gave him orders. He ignored them. That was his decision. But we could have done nothing differently. Dieter wanted to prove himself, wanted to achieve victory, wanted to believe that courage and determination were sufficient. Reality taught him otherwise. Unfortunately, the lesson killed him. Franz stared at the ground. Will it happen to us? Eric looked at both young pilots. 19 years old, 21 years old, asking if they would die. The honest answer was probably. The useful answer was different. If you follow instructions, if you maintain discipline, if you remember that survival is more important than victory, then your chances are better. Not guaranteed, just better. That is all I can offer. Both pilots nodded, walked away. Eric watched them go, wondered how long they would survive, wondered if his instructions were sufficient, suspected they were not. That night, Eric added Dieter Braun's name to a list in his personal log, a list that would grow longer, much longer. August 16th, 1943. Mission number 12. Franz Dietrich did not return. The engagement had seemed routine until it was not. 6 Bf-109s against 4 P-47s. German numerical superiority. Should have been straightforward. 3 P-47s dove away when attacked. The fourth turned to fight. Franz had been trained for turning battles. Every German pilot was trained for turning battles. The Bf-109 could outturn any Allied fighter. Intelligence confirmed this. Doctrine emphasized it. Experience with Spitfires and Hurricanes proved it. Franz entered the turn at 400 kilometers per hour. The P-47 entered at 450. Higher speed meant larger turn radius. Franz's turn was tighter. He was gaining position. The mathematics were working in his favor. Then physics intervened. In sustained turning, aircraft lose energy. Airspeed converts to altitude or bleeds away as drag. The tighter the turn, the faster the energy loss. Basic physics. Immutable. Franz turned tight. Very tight. His airspeed dropped rapidly. 400 kilometers per hour became 350, became 320, became 290. He was gaining position but losing energy. The Bf-109 was getting behind the P-47 but becoming progressively slower in the process. The P-47 turned wider, lost energy more slowly. 450 kilometers per hour became 420, became 400, became 380. Still faster than Franz. Still maintaining energy states that permitted continued maneuvering. After 90 seconds, Franz achieved firing position. He was behind the P-47. The gun solution was excellent. Range was 250 meters. Perfect parameters for the MG 150-120 cannon. But Franz's airspeed was 280 kilometers per hour. Dangerously slow, just above stalling speed. The P-47's airspeed was 370 kilometers per hour. Still comfortable, still controllable. Franz fired. 2-second burst. 40 rounds of 20mm ammunition. Every round missed. The shells passed behind the P-47's tail. Franz had not compensated sufficiently for the speed differential. At 280 kilometers per hour, his aircraft was moving slowly. The target was moving fast. The lead angle required was enormous. Franz had underestimated. The P-47 stopped turning. The pilot simply rolled level, pushed the stick forward, began accelerating away. Within 5 seconds, the P-47 had gained 100 kilometers per hour. The distance opened: 300 meters, 500 meters, 800 meters. Franz tried to follow. His aircraft had no energy: 280 kilometers per hour. The Daimler-Benz engine could not accelerate quickly from this speed. The propeller was biting into air at insufficient velocity to generate thrust efficiently. The Bf-109 mushed forward, like trying to run through deep water: maximum effort, minimal result. The P-47 reached comfortable separation, won 200 meters, then turned back. The American pilot had energy now, speed, options. He reversed his turn, came back at Franz from an angle. Franz tried to turn to defend. His aircraft was too slow. The turn was sluggish. The response delayed. The controls felt dead. He was too close to stalling speed. One more degree of turn and the wing would lose lift. The aircraft would spin. At this altitude, 800 meters recovery would be impossible. The P-47 fired from 350 meters range, 850 caliber machine guns, perhaps 150 rounds total. The burst lasted 2 seconds. Just 2 seconds. But 50 caliber rounds at 350 meters were devastating. The rounds hit Franz's Bf-109 along the engine cowling and cockpit. The Daimler-Benz engine was penetrated. Coolant sprayed. The windscreen shattered. The instrument panel disintegrated. Franz was hit multiple times. The aircraft rolled inverted without input. The pilot was either dead or incapacitated. Franz bailed out at 1,600 meters. His parachute opened. He landed in a field south of Abbeville. French resistance fighters found him within an hour. He was still alive. Barely. Multiple wounds, internal bleeding, shock. They did what they could. It was not enough. Franz died 3 hours after landing. Eric learned this from intelligence reports 2 days later. The French resistance had radioed the information to London. British intelligence had passed it to American intelligence. American intelligence had shared it with German intelligence through neutral Swiss channels. Medical courtesy. Even enemies observed some protocols. At debriefing, Major Hoffman reviewed the engagement. Franz achieved firing position, Hoffman said. This confirms our tactical doctrine is sound. The Bf-109 can outturn the P-47. Franz won the turning battle. Unfortunately, his marksmanship was poor. That is a training issue, not a tactical issue. Eric said nothing. There was nothing to say that Hoffman would hear. Franz had won the turning battle but lost all his energy in the process. Had achieved position but rendered himself vulnerable. Had prioritized victory over survival. Had died as a result. The tactics were flawed. But admitting this meant admitting that 3 years of doctrine were wrong. Institutional resistance to this admission was absolute. Yes, Herr Major, poor marksmanship, training issue. That night, Eric added Franz Dietrich's name to the list. 2 names now. Klaus Hofmeister was still alive, still flying, still following Eric's instructions, still surviving through discipline rather than aggression. Eric wrote another unsent letter. My dear Anna, Franz died today. He won a dogfight and died anyway. Achieved perfect position and was still killed. This should not be possible. In proper aerial combat, the pilot with position advantage should win. That is fundamental. But position advantage means nothing when you have no energy. Speed is life. Energy is survival. Franz forgot this. Or never learned it. Or learned it too late. I am losing pilots faster than they can be replaced. The new ones arrive with minimal training. They are eager, brave, completely unprepared. They die learning lessons that should be taught on the ground. But there is no time for proper training, no fuel for adequate practice, no capacity for systematic preparation. We are improvising, hoping, dying. I miss you. I miss the life we had before this war. I wonder if that life can ever be recovered, or if war changes people so fundamentally that return is impossible. Your Eric, across the English Channel, a different pilot wrote a different letter. Thaddeus Mercer, Tad, to everyone who knew him, 24 years old, Iowa farm boy, 3rd-generation farmer. Had learned to fly Piper Cubs at 16, had enlisted in January 1942 after Pearl Harbor, had trained for 11 months, had arrived in England in April 1943. Tad was not exceptional, would never be exceptional. In 76 combat missions, he would achieve 4 confirmed kills. Versailles unremarkable. Exactly what the Army Air Forces needed, not heroes, survivors. Pilots who flew missions, followed training, came home. Tad wrote to his father every week. Dear Pop, had another mission yesterday, got bounced by German fighters. 6 of them came diving out of the sun. Old tactic, we've seen it before. But we know what to do now. Soon as they start diving, you push your stick forward and dive too. The P-47 can dive faster than anything they have. You get away clean every time. Then you've got speed. You pull up, now you're above them and they're slow. You can attack if you want, or you can just leave. Your choice, that's the key. With the P-47, you always have choices. Training at Texas taught us this. They said the Puffin isn't built to turn with German fighters. It's built to outrun them, as long as you remember that you're okay. The airplane is tough, really tough. I've seen P-47s come home with holes you could put your fist through, engines still running, controls still working. It's like flying a tank. Some guys want to be aces, want to shoot down lots of Germans, get their names in the papers. I just want to do my missions and go home, see the farm again, help you with harvest. Hope the corn is growing good. Hope Mom is well. Tell her I'm fine. Tell her not to worry. Your son, Tad. Tad did not write about fear, did not write about the 2 pilots in his squadron who had died in June, did not write about the moment 3 days ago when a German fighter had gotten behind him and he had dove away and heard cannon shells pass overhead like freight trains screaming past. His father did not need to know these things. His mother did not need to worry. Tad was fine, was surviving, was doing his job. That was sufficient. September 1943, Stuttgart, Germany. Joseph Kessler stood in the Daimler-Benz engine manufacturing plant. 58 years old, senior shift supervisor, had worked here since 1922. 21 years. Had risen from floor worker to supervisor through dedication and competence. The plant was his life. At 02:15 hours on August 18th, the air raid siren sounded. Joseph was working night shift. 43 workers on the floor. Standard procedure during raids. Shut down machinery, proceed to shelters, wait for all clear. Joseph initiated shutdown sequences. The assembly line went quiet. Workers moved toward exits. Joseph counted, making sure everyone evacuated. 43 souls he was responsible for. The first bombs hit at 02:17, Royal Air Force. Avro Lancaster heavy bombers, each carrying 4,000-pound blockbuster bombs plus incendiaries. Area bombing. The British were not targeting the factory specifically. We're targeting the area containing the factory, everything within blast radius. Factory, roads, rail lines, worker housing, everything. Joseph reached the shelter. 41 workers reached the shelter. 2 did not, trapped in a section where roof collapsed during the first explosions. Bodies recovered later, crushed, identified by identity papers. The bombing lasted 37 minutes. 200 tons of high explosive, 50 tons of incendiaries. The noise was beyond human comprehension, beyond description. Joseph sat with hands over ears, felt each impact through concrete, felt the building shake, felt dust sift from ceiling, felt the earth itself recoil from the violence. At 02:54, the all-clear sounded. Joseph climbed from the shelter, looked at what remained. The main assembly building was gone. Not damaged. Gone. Replaced by a crater and rubble pile. The machine shop was burning, black smoke rising vertically. The warehouse was destroyed. 6 months of spare parts inventory. Destroyed. The plant manager arrived at dawn, surveyed damage, calculated losses. How long to resume production, he asked Joseph. Joseph looked at the ruins, at the fire still burning, at the workers standing in shock. Weeks, maybe months. The assembly line is destroyed, the tooling is destroyed. We need to rebuild everything. You have 2 weeks. That is impossible. Nevertheless, 2 weeks. Use whatever workers you can find. Work 24-hour shifts if necessary. We need engines. The front needs engines. You have 2 weeks. They rebuilt. Workers arrived from other cities, from other factories, construction crews, engineers. They cleared rubble, salvaged usable machinery, improvised replacements for what could not be salvaged. Worked 18-hour days, 20-hour days, slept in shifts, ate cold food, rebuilt. 14 days later, on September 1st, the plant resumed production, not at previous capacity, producing 30 engines per day instead of 80, but producing. On September 4th, the RAF bombed again, 120 tons, 31 workers killed. The rebuilt assembly line destroyed again. Joseph supervised the second rebuilding. On September 19th, the Americans bombed, United States Army Air Forces. B-17 flying fortresses. Daylight precision bombing. More accurate than British night raids, more destructive. Joseph supervised the third rebuilding. Between August 1943 and May 1944, the Daimler-Benz Stuttgart plant was bombed 47 times. 47 separate raids. The plant was rebuilt 17 times. Each time production resumed. Each time output was lower. Quality was worse. Defect rates were higher. May 1942, 800 engines per month. May 1944, 60 engines per month. 93% reduction. The mathematics were brutal, inexorable. No amount of dedication could compensate. No amount of courage could rebuild faster than bombs destroyed. The system was collapsing under sustained assault. Joseph Kessler died November 14, 1944. Not from bombing, from exhaustion. Heart failure. Collapsed on factory floor during night shift. Dead before medics arrived. 59 years old. Worked himself to death trying to maintain production. Werner Kessler received notification by letter from Joseph's wife. Werner showed Eric the letter one evening in December 1943, in the maintenance hangar, after the other mechanics had left. My brother believed in the work, Werner said quietly. His voice was flat, empty. Believed every engine mattered. Believed if he produced enough engines, we could win. Eric looked at the letter, at the careful handwriting, at the words describing Joseph's death, describing his dedication, his sacrifice, his futile effort against impossible mathematics. He was wrong, Werner continued. Did not matter how many engines we produced. The Americans produced more. The British destroyed them faster than we built them. The mathematics were impossible from the start. Eric thought about Joseph Kessler, a man he had never met, a man who had died trying to give German fighters the engines they needed, a man defeated not by lack of courage or dedication but by arithmetic. Simple arithmetic. The enemy could destroy faster than Germany could build. I am sorry for your loss, Eric said. Werner folded the letter, placed it in his pocket. He died 4 numbers, Herr Oberleutnant. Production numbers. Statistics. That is all any of us are. Numbers in someone's calculation. That night, Eric wrote another unsent letter. My dear Anna, I learned today about Werner's brother, Joseph Kessler, died building engines, died trying to keep pace with American production, died because mathematics were impossible. I wonder if my death will be similar. Not from combat, just from impossible mathematics, from fighting a war where the outcome was predetermined by production capacity and resource availability. I have stopped believing courage matters, now believe only systems matter, and our system is smaller than theirs, which means we are losing, slowly, inevitably. I love you. Think about you every day. Think about our child. I want to survive, to meet them, to return to you. But survival is not determined by wanting, is determined by mathematics. And the mathematics are not favorable. Your Eric, December 1943. Eric had flown 47 missions against P-47 Thunderbolts, 47 encounters with American fighters. He had achieved 3 confirmed kills. Only 3. In 47 missions, 1 kill per 15 missions. Abysmal ratio. The 3 kills had been luck. Damaged aircraft, pilots who made mistakes, aircraft separated from formation. Vulnerable targets. Eric had capitalized on opportunities, but opportunities were rare. Most encounters ended in stalemate, P-47s diving away, German fighters unable to follow. No victories, no defeats, just separation. Eric had lost 8 wingmen, 8 pilots, not all to Peeves directly, some to flak like Dieter, some to errors like Franz, but all during missions against P-47s, all while trying to engage an opponent the Bf-109 could not effectively fight. Klaus Hofmeister was still alive, 20 years old now, had survived from 19 to 20 through discipline and luck. Mostly discipline. Klaus listened to Eric's instructions, did not chase diving P-47s, did not press attacks beyond reasonable limits, did not prioritize victory over survival. Klaus had 3 confirmed kills of his own. Not an ace, not exceptional, just a survivor. Like Eric, like Tad Mercer across the channel. Just men trying to do jobs they had been assigned, trying to survive systems larger than themselves. The mathematics were clear. Against Spitfires, Eric's kill-to-loss ratio had been 3.2 to 1, 3 victories for every loss. Against P-47s, the ratio was 0.37 to 1, 1 victory for every 3 losses. His effectiveness had declined by 88%. This was not because Eric had become less skilled, Not because American pilots were better trained. This was because the P-47 system was superior to the Bf-109 system in every category that mattered: engine power, structural strength, diving speed, energy retention, production capacity, pilot training pipeline, logistical support. Every category, every metric, every measurable parameter. Individual skill had become irrelevant. On December 15th, a letter arrived from Anna. Eric recognized her handwriting immediately, opened the envelope carefully, read, "My dearest Eric, our son was born November 18th. I have named him Otto after your father. He is healthy, strong, perfect in every way. He has your eyes, your hands. When I hold him, I see you. I imagine you holding him, teaching him, being his father. When will you come home? Otto needs his father. I need my husband. The war cannot last forever. Surely it will end soon. Please come home. All my love, Anna." Eric read the letter 3 times, held it in his hands, felt the paper, the ink, the physical evidence that he had a son, that somewhere in Germany a child existed who shared his blood, who would carry his name, who had never seen his father, might never see his father. Otto von Steinberg, 3 weeks old, alive, real, waiting. Eric placed the letter in his footlocker, did not lock it immediately, looked at Anna's photograph, at the wedding picture from 1940, at the woman who had waited 4 years, who had given birth alone, who had named their son after Eric's father, who believed Eric would return. Eric wanted to believe the same, wanted to believe survival was possible, wanted to believe mathematics could be overcome through wanting. But 3 years of war had taught him otherwise. Survival was not determined by desire, was determined by systems. And the system he fought for was collapsing. That night, Eric made a decision. Personal, private, non-negotiable. He would survive, whatever necessary. He would not die for impossible mathematics, would not sacrifice himself for victories the system made impossible, would not prioritize abstract concepts like honor or glory over concrete realities like Anna and Otto. He would fly his missions, follow his orders, do his duty, but would not sacrifice himself for numbers that could not be changed, would not die trying to achieve what the system made impossible. Individual heroism was obsolete. Individual survival was all that remained. This decision would define his remaining missions, would keep him alive through 1940, through the collapse, through the end, would allow him to return to Anna and Otto, would allow him to meet his son, would allow him to build whatever life remained possible after the war. It was not heroic, not glorious, not worthy of songs or stories. It was just mathematics, simple calculations, probability and risk, survival rates and loss statistics. Eric von Steinberg was 29 years old, would fly 153 more combat missions, would achieve 56 more confirmed victories, would lose 6 more wingmen, would survive. But survival was not victory. Survival was just statistics working slowly instead of quickly. Just another number in someone's calculation. Just one more data point in the mathematics of war. And mathematics did not care about individual stories, about hopes or dreams or families waiting. Mathematics only cared about production rates and loss ratios and systematic advantage. The side with better mathematics would win, was winning, had already won. The remaining time was just formality, just working through equations whose answers were predetermined. Eric understood this completely now. Understanding did not help. Understanding just made the truth more bearable, made the waiting easier, made the dying slower. Outside his window, snow began to fall. December in France. Cold, dark, winter operations beginning. Different challenges, same mathematics, same inevitable outcome. Eric lay on his narrow bed, thought about Otto, about a son he had never met, about a future that might exist if the mathematics allowed it, about survival as the only victory that mattered anymore. And somewhere in Iowa, Tad Mercer wrote another letter home, talking about weather and missions and coming home for harvest, believing the war would end soon, believing survival was probable, not knowing the mathematics, not understanding the systems, just flying, just surviving, just being one more number in equations too large to comprehend. The war continued. The mathematics continued. The systems continued grinding forward. Inevitable, inexorable, unstoppable. And individual men survived or died based on calculations they did not understand and could not change. That was the truth of modern warfare. That was the lesson Eric had learned. That was the burden he would carry for the remaining 39 years of his life. Physics does not negotiate. Systems defeat individuals. Mathematics determines outcomes. Everything else was just mythology. March 15th, 1945. The war was ending. Everyone knew. The question was not whether Germany would lose, but when. And how many more would die before the inevitable conclusion. Erich von Steinberg was 31 years old, 2 years older than the man who had encountered his first P-47. Those 2 years felt like 20. His face carried lines that had not existed before. His hands trembled in the mornings until the first mission settled his nerves. He weighed 8 kilograms less than in 1943. Food quality had deteriorated. Everything had deteriorated. 87 confirmed victories. The number was meaningless now. Just arithmetic. Bodies that had fallen from sky because Eric had been faster or luckier or better positioned. Men who had families, who had written letters, who had believed in something. Eric believed in survival. Nothing else remained. The briefing that morning was perfunctory. Major Hoffman was gone. Transferred to training command or dead, no one knew. Command structures had become fluid. Officers appeared and disappeared. The new commanding officer was a captain. 26 years old, had arrived 3 weeks ago, knew nothing about the pilots he commanded. Sector 9 patrol, the captain said without preamble. 3,000 meters altitude. Engage enemy fighters if encountered. Avoid bombers. Return when fuel dictates. Simple orders, survival orders. The Luftwaffe was no longer attacking, was existing, waiting for the end. Eric led 5 aircraft. Klaus was still with him, 21 years old now, 71 missions flown. 4 confirmed victories, not an ace, a survivor, like Eric. The other 3 pilots were new, 17, 18, maybe 19 years old. Difficult to tell. They all looked similar, young faces with ancient eyes, 80 hours flight training, maybe 90. Sent to combat squadrons because there was nowhere else to send them. The training pipeline had collapsed. Fuel for training had disappeared. These pilots learned by flying, learned by fighting, died by dying. Eric had stopped learning their names after the 30th replacement, remembered faces instead. This one had red hair. This one stuttered when nervous. This one was left-handed. Small details, impersonal details. Details that would not create attachment, would not hurt when they died, when not if. They took off at 09:15, 5 Bf-109K4 fighters. The newest variant, supposedly improved. DB605D engine rated at 2,000 horsepower with methanol water injection. In reality producing perhaps 400 horsepower. Better than earlier engines. Still inadequate. The K4 was heavier than earlier variants, less maneuverable. The improvements had been compromises. More power but more weight. Better climb rate but worse turn rate. The aircraft no longer felt like a Bf-109. Felt like something designed by committee, trying to be everything. Succeeding at nothing. They climbed to 3,000 meters, leveled off, began patrol pattern. The sky was empty, no contrails, no bombers, no enemy fighters. Just 5 German aircraft flying circles above a country running out of time. At 10:23 radio crackled. Adler flight multiple contacts, bearing 310 Angels 10, count 12 type heavy. 12 aircraft, same altitude as Eric's flight. The mathematics were unfavorable. 12 versus 5, more than 2-to-1 disadvantage. Adler flight maintain altitude and position. Do not initiate engagement. The red-haired pilot's voice. Young, uncertain, wanting to sound brave. Adler 1, should we climb for advantage? Negative. We maintain position. We do not initiate. The 12 contacts resolved into visibility. P-47 Thunderbolts. Still the predominant American fighter. Still impossible to engage effectively. 2 years had passed since Eric's first encounter. Nothing fundamental had changed, just the numbers. More American fighters, fewer German fighters. The mathematics shifting further toward inevitability. The P-47s saw them, began turning, not aggressively, just establishing position, assessing threat level, deciding whether these 5 German fighters were worth engaging or merely monitoring. Eric held formation, held altitude. The tension was thick. The young pilots wanted to attack, wanted to prove themselves, wanted to believe courage mattered, wanted to die gloriously rather than survive practically. One P-47 detached from formation, dove toward Eric's flight. Not committed attack, Just probing. Testing resolve. Adler flight hold formation. Do not break. The P-47 closed to 1,000 meters, then 800, then broke off without firing. Climbed back to its formation. Just testing. Just seeing if German fighters would scatter, would panic, would make themselves vulnerable. Another P-47 tried the same maneuver, same result. Probing defenses, assessing responses, professional work, methodical, not aggressive, not taking unnecessary risks. The Americans were not trying to kill German fighters anymore. We're just trying to clear airspace. Make German fighters leave. Achieve objectives without combat. Efficiency. Economy. Why risk losses when presence alone accomplished the mission? The standoff lasted 4 minutes. Then the P-47 formation turned west. Departed the sector. Mission accomplished. Sky cleared. No shots fired. No losses taken. Maximum efficiency. Eric's flight remained on patrol another 40 minutes. Saw nothing else. Returned to base. All 5 aircraft intact. All 5 pilots alive. This was what victory looked like now. Not killing enemy, just surviving until next mission. At debriefing, the captain asked, "Why did you not engage 5 aircraft? You could have achieved something." "We could have died," Eric said flatly. 12 P-47s against 5 Bf-109s. Outcome was predetermined. We returned with 5 aircraft. That is success. The captain had no response. What could he say? The war was lost. Everyone knew. Killing a few more Americans would not change outcomes. Preserving German pilots for whatever came after was the only rational objective. But rationality had never won wars. Systems won wars, and Germany's system had collapsed completely. April 15, 1945. The mission was desperate from the start. The briefing had been chaotic. Conflicting orders, unclear objectives, command structure disintegrating in real time. Escort bombers attacking enemy columns, the captain had said initially. But there were no bombers. Bomber squadrons had ceased operations. No fuel, no crews, no aircraft remaining. Intercept enemy fighters, the captain corrected. But intercept where front lines were collapsing. Enemy fighters were everywhere. Could not intercept everything. Just fly, the captain said finally, voice empty, defeated. Report what you see, return if possible. Eric led 4 aircraft, Klaus and 3 new pilots whose faces blurred together. Names Eric had not learned, would not learn. They would probably be dead within weeks anyway. Names were unnecessary for temporary personnel. They took off at 1340, climbed to 2,500 meters, flew east toward where front lines had been last week. Maybe still were, maybe not. Intelligence was unreliable. Communication was fragmentary. Reality changed faster than reports. The countryside below showed devastation, bomb craters, burnt villages, destroyed rail lines, columns of refugees moving west, columns of Allied vehicles moving east, 2 worlds passing each other, one fleeing, one conquering. At 14:12, they found the enemy. 12 P-47s. Again, Americans flew in elements of 4. 3 elements. 12 aircraft, mathematical precision, organizational doctrine, systematic application of force. Eric's flight 4 aircraft, 3-to-1 disadvantage, worse than march and counter. The mathematics were deteriorating proportionally with German capability. The P-47s had altitude advantage, 200 meters. Eric's flight was at 500 meters, 700 meters disadvantage. Enough to determine the engagement before it started. Among the 12 P-47s was Thaddeus Mercer. Tad was now a veteran. 76 missions flown, 4 confirmed kills. Not an ace, not exceptional, just experienced. Just a survivor who had learned how to stay alive through 2 years of combat. Tad recognized the desperation in how German fighters moved. Slow, tentative, already defeated. The fight was not about victory anymore. It was about survival. Anyone with experience could see that. The P-47 formation dove. Standard tactic. Eric had seen it hundreds of times. Adler flight break right, die. The formation scattered. 4 directions. Survival instinct overriding tactical coherence. 12 fighters could not chase 4 targets simultaneously. Someone would escape. Statistics. Probability. Mathematics. Eric dove southwest. Maximum throttle. The DB-605D responded. 400 horsepower. Not enough, never enough. But something. A P-47 followed. Just one. The others had selected different targets. or had chosen not to pursue, had recognized that killing these German fighters was unnecessary. The war was over. These men were defeated already. Tad Mercer followed Eric, not aggressively, just maintaining contact, keeping the German fighter away from whatever objective the others were pursuing. Professional work, methodical, not taking risks, not trying for kills, just doing the job. Eric dove steeper, 45 degrees, 50 degrees, speed building, 650 kilometers per hour, 700, 750. The Bf 109K4 was shaking, protesting. The airframe was tired. 2 years of combat operations, minimal maintenance, degraded components. The aircraft was holding together through momentum rather than reliability. Tad stayed at 800 meters distance, not gaining, not losing, just maintaining separation. He was not trying to shoot Eric down, was just keeping him occupied, keeping him away, preventing him from interfering with the mission. Eric pulled out at 800 meters altitude. The G-forces crushed him. Vision grayed, blood pooled in legs. He held the pull. The aircraft shuddered violently, wings flexed dangerously, but held. He leveled at 600 meters, speed bleeding off, 550 kilometers per hour, 450, 350, energy dissipating into altitude recovery and drag. Tad leveled behind him, 600 meters separation. Still there, patient, professional. Eric turned hard left, maximum rate turn. The stall warning horn sounded. He was at the edge. 1 degree more and the wing would quit. He would spin, would die. Tad did not follow the turn, extended instead, flew straight, building speed, then turned back in a wide, lazy arc, not trying for position, just monitoring, watching, keeping Eric away from the others. Tad recognized what was happening. This German pilot was running, was not fighting, was just trying to escape, trying to survive. The war was over for him even if he did not know it yet. "Let him go," Tad said over the radio. "He's done." The other P-47 pilots acknowledged. They had better targets, more important objectives. One fleeing German fighter was irrelevant to the mission. Eric looked around. Klaus was gone. The 3 new pilots were gone, either scattered too far or shot down. Eric was alone. He checked his fuel gauge, 11 minutes remaining. Not enough to fight, not enough to run far, just enough to find somewhere to land. Maybe. He turned west, away from the front, away from the P-47. Tad watched him go. Did not pursue. Mission accomplished. German fighter removed from battle space. No kill necessary. Eric flew low, 200 meters above ground, following roads, looking for suitable landing site. The countryside was wrong. Villages he recognized from maps were rubble. Road networks were disrupted. Bridges were destroyed. He was lost in a country he had defended for 3 years. The engine coughed. Once. Twice. Fuel exhaustion. The tanks were empty. The Daimler-Benz engine that had carried Eric through 200 missions fell silent. The propeller windmilled in the airstream. The cockpit went quiet except for wind noise. Peaceful. Almost serene. Eric had 90 seconds of glide time remaining. Maybe less. He scanned for a field. Found one. Plowed, uneven, rough. Better than nothing. Only option. He lined up. No time for proper pattern. No time for checklist. Just straight in. Gear down, flaps down. Gliding, 150 kilometers per hour. 120, 100. The wheels touched earth. The aircraft bounced, settled, rolled. The rough ground pulled at landing gear. The tail rose. For a moment, Eric thought the aircraft would flip, nose over, but it settled, stopped. Silence. Complete. Absolute. Eric sat in the cockpit, breathing, alive, uninjured. The absurdity was overwhelming. 2 years of combat, 200 missions, 87 victories, ended not in dogfight, not in flames, just out of fuel in a plowed field behind enemy lines. He climbed out, stood on the wing, placed his hand on the fuselage. The metal was warm from engine heat, smooth, solid. He had flown aircraft like this for 4 years, had trusted his life to German engineering. The metal had never failed him. The system had failed. But the metal had been honest. He heard engines in the distance, vehicles, moving east. The sound was wrong for German vehicles. American, the distinctive rumble of American trucks and jeeps and tanks. The sound of a winning system. The convoy appeared over low-rise. 5 trucks, 2 jeeps, perhaps 40 soldiers. They saw Eric immediately. A lone pilot standing next to a German fighter in American-controlled territory. Eric raised his hands. The universal gesture. Surrender. Acceptance. Defeat. The vehicles stopped. Soldiers dismounted. Young, well-fed, clean uniforms, modern equipment, professional bearing. They approached cautiously, weapons ready but not threatening, just careful. A lieutenant walked forward. 24 years old, maybe. American accent. Midwestern. You speak English? Yes, Eric said. You armed? Pistol, left hip. Eric moved slowly, carefully, removed the Walther P38 pistol, held it by the barrel, offered it to the lieutenant. The lieutenant took it, examined it, pocketed it. How many kills you got? The question was conversational, curious, not hostile, not aggressive, just interested. 87. The lieutenant whistled softly. Jesus, 87, you're good. Eric looked at this young American officer, this representative of the system that had defeated Germany, this man who spoke casually about numbers representing 87 men who would never see families again. 87 people who had believed in something. 87 deaths attributed to Eric's skill. Good is not enough, Eric said quietly. The lieutenant frowned, did not understand. How could he? He was part of a winning system. Winners did not need to understand that skill alone was insufficient. Winners could believe victory came from superiority rather than from having more of everything that mattered. Come on, the lieutenant said. We'll get you processed. POW camp. You'll be treated according to Geneva Convention. War's almost over anyway. You'll be fine. Eric walked toward the American vehicles, left his BF 109K4 in the field, left 2 years of combat, left the war. Behind him, his aircraft sat abandoned. One more piece of wreckage in a country covered with wreckage. One more artifact of a system that had failed. One more data point in the mathematics of defeat. May 1945. The war ended. Germany surrendered. The mathematics had reached their inevitable conclusion. Erich von Steinberg sat in a prisoner of war camp in Belgium. 2,000 German prisoners, Luftwaffe pilots, army officers, Navy personnel, scattered remnants of defeated military. The conditions were tolerable. Food was adequate. Medical care was provided. The Americans followed the rules, were professional, were humane, were magnanimous in victory. Eric shared a tent with 11 other pilots. They did not talk much. What was there to say? They had lost. The reasons were complex. The outcome was simple. Talking did not change either. In June, an American pilot joined them, not as prisoner, as interviewer. American intelligence was conducting debriefings, trying to understand German capabilities, cataloging what had worked and what had not, building knowledge for future conflicts. The American was Lieutenant Garrett Morrison, 27 years old, P-47 pilot, 81 combat missions flown, 7 confirmed kills, not an ace, just a veteran, just a survivor. Like Eric, like Tad, just men who had done jobs assigned to them. Morrison sat with Eric one afternoon in June 1946. They shared cigarettes, American cigarettes, better than German cigarettes had been. Everything American was better. That was the lesson. That was the reality. I read your file, Morrison said. 87 kills. That's impressive. It is arithmetic, Eric replied. Nothing more. You flew against P-47s extensively. Yes. What did you think of them? Eric considered the question. Considered truth versus diplomacy. Decided truth cost nothing now. The war was over. Honesty would not extend it. Your aircraft was superior to ours in every category that mattered. Power, speed, structural strength, dive performance. We could not engage you effectively. Once you learned to dive away from attackers, we had no tactical solution. Morrison nodded slowly, pulled on his cigarette. We lost a lot of guys before we figured that out. Guys who tried to turn with you. You were better at turning. Turning did not matter. You had speed. You had altitude advantage through power. You could choose when to fight and when to disengage. We could not. That determined outcomes. In the production, Morrison added, we heard you were running out of everything. Fuel, parts, pilots. Yes, your system was larger than ours. Much larger. Individual skill became irrelevant against systematic advantage. You did not defeat us through superior courage or superior tactics. You defeated us through superior systems. Morrison pulled on his cigarette, exhaled smoke, thought about this. That's a hell of a way to think about war. It is the only accurate way. Your pilots were not better than ours. Your aircraft were. Your production was. Your logistics were. Your training pipeline was. You defeated us through mathematics, through having more of everything that mattered. Does that make it easier knowing you lost to systems instead of men? Eric thought about wingmen who had died, about factories that had been bombed, about fuel that had been contaminated, about Joseph Kessler working himself to death for production numbers that could not change outcomes, about 2 years of flying missions against impossible odds, about mathematics that had been brutal and honest and absolute. No, Eric said, it makes it worse. Men can be defeated with dignity, can fight bravely and lose honorably. Systems are just mathematics. There is no dignity in losing to arithmetic, no honor in being defeated by production capacity. Just cold recognition that you were on the wrong side of the numbers. Morrison had no response. They finished cigarettes in silence. Then Morrison pulled out a notebook. You want to see the real numbers? Eric nodded. Morrison flipped pages, found what he wanted. American pilot training, 300 hours minimum. Monthly output, 50 fully qualified pilots. Total trained, 1942 through 1945, 193,000 pilots. Combat losses in Europe, 18,000. Net available at any time, 175,000. He turned the page. German pilot training by 1944, 110 hours average. Monthly output, 15 pilots. Total available, maybe 2,000 at any given time. Losses 1943 through 1944, 8,000 pilots. Net and available negative. You were losing pilots faster than you could train them. Eric stared at the numbers. Negative. Germany had operated with negative pilot availability for the last 18 months of the war. The mathematics had been impossible. Everyone had known. No one had admitted it publicly. Had kept flying, had kept dying, had kept pretending the numbers could somehow be overcome. You couldn't win, Morrison said quietly. The numbers made it impossible. Even if every German pilot was an ace, even if your aircraft had been better, the production gap was too large. The training gap was too large. The logistics gap was too large. Everything was too large. Eric nodded. I learned this in June 1943. Knew it within 90 seconds. No one would listen. No one wanted to hear that courage was insufficient. That skill did not matter. That the war was lost regardless of how hard we fought. They sat in silence. Two pilots who had fought on opposite sides. Who had survived. Who now understood that survival had been determined as systems they had not controlled and could not have changed. What will you do, Morrison asked. After release. Return to my family, my wife Anna, my son Otto. I have not seen Otto. He was born while I was flying. He will not recognize me. I will have to introduce myself to my own son. That's rough. That is reality. That is what war costs, not just lives, relationships. I'm years that cannot be recovered. Morrison stood, extended his hand. Good luck, Eric. I hope you find peace. Eric shook his hand. Peace, yes. That would be valuable. Though I am not certain peace is possible for those who understand what we understand. Morrison left. Eric sat alone. Thought about mathematics, about systems, about the 39 years he would have remaining, about what to do with knowledge that no one wanted to hear. June 1947. Eric was released. 2 years and 1 month after capture. The American processing clerk gave him discharge papers, train ticket to Stuttgart, 50 Deutsche Marks. A handshake. Good luck, the clerk said. Eric took the train west, across Belgium into Germany. The countryside was scarred. Every major city showed bombing damage. Bridges were temporary. Rail stations were rebuilt with salvaged materials. Germany looked like what it was, a defeated country trying to remember how to function. Stuttgart was worse than Eric had imagined. Entire neighborhoods were gone, just rubble and cleared lots. The Daimler-Benz plant where Joseph Kessler had died was a shell. Empty buildings, broken windows, no production, no workers, just silence. Eric's apartment building had survived. Structure intact, windows broken, water system did not work. But the building stood, more than many could say. He climbed stairs to third floor. His hands shook, not from fear. From simple uncertainty of seeing wife and son after 4 years. 4 years absent. 4 years of letters. 4 years of wondering if this moment would ever happen. He knocked on the door. Anna opened it. She had aged. Everyone had aged, but she was still Anna, still the woman he had married in 1940 when the world had seemed full of possibility, before the mathematics had become obvious. She looked at him. Did not speak immediately. then wrapped her arms around him, held on as if he might disappear, as if releasing him would make him vanish again. Behind her, a small boy watched, 3 years and 7 months old. Dark hair, serious eyes, solemn expression. Otto. Eric knelt, put himself at eye level with his son. Otto, I am your father, I am Papa. Otto stepped backward, away from this stranger, this man who claimed to be father but whom Otto had no memory of. Otto had been born November 1943. It was now June 1947. 43 months. Otto's entire conscious memory. Eric was not father. Eric was stranger. Anna picked Otto up. It is okay, Otto. This is Papa. He was away. Now he is home. It will be okay. Otto buried his face in Anna's shoulder, did not look at Eric. Eric stood, the moment he had imagined for 4 years, the reunion he had survived for, and his son did not know him, did not recognize him, did not accept him. He will learn, Anna said softly. Give him time. He is only 3. He will learn. But time was what Eric had lost. 4 years, 48 months, 460 days. Otto's entire conscious memory could not recover that, could only start over, build from nothing, hope that eventually Otto would accept that this stranger was father. That night, Eric lay next to Anna in their bed. Otto slept in small bed in corner of room, same apartment. But everything had changed. The world had changed. They had changed. Nothing was recoverable. Only starting over was possible. What was it like? Anna asked quietly. Eric did not know how to answer, how to explain 2 years of watching men die, 2 years of flying machines that were obsolete, 2 years of understanding you were losing and being unable to stop it, 2 years of mathematics crushing hope with perfect efficiency. It was war, he said finally. It does not matter now. But it did matter, would always matter. The war had ended, but the understanding remained. The understanding that systems were more important than individuals, that courage was not enough, that skill was not enough, that the side with better mathematics won regardless of how hard the other side fought. Eric would carry this understanding for the rest of his life. 1947 through 1965. Eric worked as aerospace engineer for Dornier, designing aircraft, not fighters, transport planes, civilian aircraft. Germany was forbidden from building military aircraft under occupation terms. Eric did not mind. He had seen enough of military aviation, had seen what it cost, what it destroyed, what it failed to achieve. He was good at his job. Combat experience informed design work. He understood structural stress, understood power-to-weight ratios, understood practical limits of what pilots could handle and what aircraft could survive. He taught younger engineers, taught them to think about systems rather than components. A good engine in a poor airframe fails, he would say. A poor engine in a good airframe fails. Everything must work together. The system is what matters. Individual excellence in one area cannot compensate for systematic weakness. The younger engineers listened. Some understood, most did not. They wanted to believe individual brilliance mattered, wanted to believe their designs could overcome systematic constraints. Eric let them believe. They would learn eventually. Experience was the only teacher for some lessons. In 1962, NATO held an aviation conference in Brussels. Eric attended as Dornier representative. Garrett Morrison attended as U.S. Air Force representative. Lieutenant Colonel now, career officer, 20 years of service. They recognized each other across the conference hall. Sat together at lunch. You're doing well, Morrison said. Civilian aviation suits you. It is quiet, Eric replied. I prefer quiet now. I read about your work, the transport designs. Very practical, very efficient. Efficiency matters. In civilian aviation, every kilogram of excess weight is profit lost. Every liter of excess fuel is money wasted. The mathematics are honest, direct, no pretense. Morrison smiled, still thinking in terms of mathematics. Always, mathematics do not lie, do not pretend, do not promise what cannot be delivered. They simply are. That is comforting. They ate in silence for a moment. Then Morrison said, I looked you up. 87 kills. Very impressive record. Numbers, Eric said dismissively. Us numbers. Arithmetic. No different from production statistics or loss ratios. Just data points in someone's calculation. Still, you were good. Eric looked at Morrison, this American who did not understand, who could not understand because he had been on the winning side. Winners could afford to believe individual excellence mattered, could believe their skill had determined outcomes. Losers knew better. Your system was better, Eric said. That is all. Not better pilots, better system. That is what I learned. That is what the war taught me. Individual excellence is obsolete in modern warfare. Systems determine outcomes. Everything else is mythology. Morrison nodded slowly. Maybe, but you survived. That counts for something. Survival is not victory. Survival is just mathematics working slowly instead of quickly. Just being on the favorable side of probability calculations. Nothing more. They finished lunch, shook hands, did not meet again. What would be the point? They had fought on opposite sides of a war whose outcome had been predetermined by mathematics neither had controlled. Meeting again would just reinforce lessons already learned. 1978. Eric was 64 years old, retired from Dornier, living quietly in Stuttgart with Anna. Otto was 35, married, had given them 2 grandchildren. The family had healed slowly. The distance between father and son had closed over decades. Imperfectly, incompletely, but closed enough. Eric began writing his memoir, not because he wanted to, because he felt obligated. The younger generation did not understand, thought the war had been about ideology, about good versus evil, about heroes and villains. They did not understand that wars were about systems, about production capacity, about mathematics. He wrote in longhand, slowly, carefully. The memoir was not about victories, was not about heroism, was about education. About learning that individual excellence was obsolete in modern warfare. About understanding that systems defeat courage with perfect efficiency. He titled it, Physics Does Not Negotiate. The book was 340 pages, published in 1979 by Small Academic Press. Sold 3,000 copies in Germany. Not many, but enough. The book found unexpected audience in American military academies. West Point, Annapolis, Air Force Academy. American officers recognized truth in Eric's analysis. That modern warfare was about systems integration. That individual heroism was obsolete. That the side with better logistics and production would win regardless of battlefield courage. Eric received letters from American officers, thanking him for clarity, for honesty, for articulating what they had been teaching but could not express as concisely. The irony was not lost on Eric, that American officers were learning from German defeat, that the losing side could teach the winning side. That understanding came from failure rather than success. Anna read the memoir before publication, sat with the manuscript for 3 days. When she finished, she held Eric's hand and said, "You wrote the truth. That is all we can do. Write the truth and hope someone understands." She died in 1980, 2 years before Eric. Heart failure. They had had 40 years together after the war. Not enough to compensate for 4 years lost, but something. They had built something from the wreckage, had created family, had found peace of a sort. Not complete peace, but sufficient peace. Enough. Eric kept her photograph on his desk, next to photograph of Otto as child, the 2 people he had survived for, the 2 reasons mathematics had mattered, why survival had been necessary, why coming home had been imperative. November 15th, 1982, Erich von Steinberg died at 68 years old. Heart failure, peacetime death, surrounded by family. Anna was gone, but Otto was there. The grandchildren were there, the family he had built, the reason he had survived mathematics that had killed others. His last words were to Otto, "The letters, in my study. Read them." Otto found the letters 2 days after the funeral. Locked in desk drawer, 73 letters, all addressed to Anna, all written during the war, all unsent, all telling truth that could not be shared during wartime, all documenting the progression from confidence to understanding to acceptance. Otto read them over 3 days, read his father's progression, read entries about wingmen dying, about engines failing, about fuel quality degrading, about mathematics becoming impossible, about systems defeating individuals, about courage being insufficient. The last letter was dated May 10th, 1945, 5 days before Eric's capture. "My dearest Anna, I have survived. I do not know how. I do not know why, but I have survived. When this war ends, and it will end, soon I will return to you. I will meet our son. I will try to be the father and husband you deserve, but I will not be the man I was. That man believed courage mattered, that skill mattered, that individual excellence could overcome any obstacle. I have learned differently. I have learned that systems matter, that mathematics matters, that the side with more resources wins regardless of how hard the other side fights. This is not the lesson I wanted to learn, but it is the lesson the war taught. I love you. I will love Otto. I will build whatever life remains possible in whatever Germany remains after this defeat. But I will never forget that courage cannot defeat systems. That skill cannot defeat production. That individual excellence cannot overcome organizational superiority. This is the truth of modern warfare. This is what I will carry for the rest of my life. Your Eric, Otto folded the letter carefully, sat with it. His father had carried this understanding for 37 years, had never spoken of it directly, had only written it in letters never sent, had documented truth in private while living public life of normalcy. Now Otto understood his father's distance, his father's silence, his father's insistence on systematic thinking over individual heroism, his father's cynicism about military glory, his father's dismissal of individual achievement. His father had learned that individual excellence was obsolete, had spent the rest of his life trying to warn others, trying to teach lessons no one wanted to learn. 2018, Otto von Steinberg was 75 years old. A historian contacted him, writing book about Luftwaffe aces, wanted to interview him about his father. They met in Otto's apartment, the same apartment Eric had returned to in 1947. Otto had inherited it, had kept it. The walls held photographs. Eric in uniform, Eric with Anna, Eric with grandchildren, Eric receiving Dornier Engineering Award, Eric at NATO conference. A life documented in images. Your father was remarkable, the historian said. 87 victories, one of the most successful German pilots. Otto shook his head. My father did not think of himself as remarkable. He thought of himself as a statistic, a number in a system that was destined to lose. But 87 victories meant nothing, Otto interrupted. That is what he told me once, late in his life. He said the number meant nothing because the side that won was not the side with best individuals, was the side with best system. That individual excellence had been rendered obsolete by systematic advantage. What did he mean? Otto picked up one of his father's photographs. Eric at 29, young, confident, before the understanding had arrived, before the mathematics had crushed certainty. He meant that modern warfare is not about heroes, is about mathematics, production capacity, logistics, training pipelines. The Americans did not beat Germany by being braver or more skilled. They beat Germany by building more aircraft, training, more pilots producing more engines, creating a system so large that individual German excellence became irrelevant. That seems cynical. It is not cynical. It is accurate. My father fought in a war where his side had better trained pilots, better tactical doctrine, better aircraft design initially, and lost anyway. Because the other side had more of everything, more production, more resources, more capacity to absorb losses and continue. Otto set down the photograph. That was my father's lesson. The lesson he spent 40 years trying to teach anyone who would listen. Courage cannot defeat systems. Skill cannot defeat production. Individual excellence cannot overcome organizational superiority. He paused, picked up another photograph. Eric in 1978, writing his memoir, old but still sharp, still teaching, still trying to warn. My father was not a hero, Otto said. He was a good pilot trapped in a bad system fighting against a better system. That is all. That is the truth. Everything else is mythology we tell ourselves to make the mathematics feel less brutal. The historian wrote notes. Otto watched, wondered if this history would understand, wondered if anyone would understand, suspected the answer was no. People wanted heroes, wanted individual excellence to matter, wanted to believe courage could overcome any obstacle. The mathematics said otherwise. But mathematics were unpopular. Truth was unpopular. People preferred mythology. When my father died, Otto continued, I found his combat log. He had kept detailed records. Every mission, every encounter, every wingman lost. He had calculated his kill-to-loss ratios. Against Spitfires, 3.2 to 1. Against P-47s, 0.37 to 1. His effectiveness declined 88%, not because he became less skilled, because the system he fought against was superior in every category that mattered. Otto looked directly at the historian. That is what you should write. Not that my father was remarkable, that he learned individual excellence is obsolete, that modern warfare is mathematics, that systems defeat courage with perfect efficiency. That is the lesson. That is the truth. Everything else is distraction. The interview ended. The historian left. Otto sat alone in the apartment, surrounded by photographs, by memories, by documents, by evidence of his father's life. Erich von Steinberg, 29 years old to 68 years old, 87 victories. Survived the war, married to Anna for 40 years. Father to Otto, grandfather to two. Aerospace engineer. Author. Teacher. A man who learned that individual excellence was obsolete, who spent his life trying to share that understanding, who died knowing the lesson was still not learned, would probably never be learned, because learning it required accepting uncomfortable truth, required abandoning comforting mythology, required understanding that courage was not enough. Most people could not accept this, did not want to accept this, preferred to believe heroism mattered, preferred to believe skill determined outcomes, preferred mythology over mathematics. Erich had known this, had written anyway, had taught anyway, had tried anyway. Not because he expected success, because it was correct, because truth mattered even when unwelcome, because someone needed to document what he had learned even if no one wanted to hear it. The sky over Europe in 1945 did not belong to the best pilots, belonged to the side that could replace every lost aircraft with two more, that could train new pilots faster than old pilots died, that could bomb enemy factories while protecting their own, that could sustain war of attrition until the other side simply ran out of everything. The sky belonged to the side with better system, with better mathematics, with better logistics in production and training and resources. Individual excellence was irrelevant against that reality. The P-47 Thunderbolt ended World War II with official kill-to-loss ratio of 4.6 to 1, having flown 546,000 combat missions, having destroyed thousands of enemy aircraft and tens of thousands of ground vehicles, having proven that systematic advantage was more valuable than individual skill. 15,686 P-47s were built between 1941 and 1945. Production rate at peak 2,000 aircraft per month. The American industrial system produced them faster than Germany could destroy them. The mathematics were inevitable. The outcome was predetermined. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 was produced in greater numbers. 33,984 aircraft total, more than any other fighter in history. But German production could not keep pace with German losses, could not replace pilots, could not maintain quality control, could not sustain logistics network. The system collapsed under weight of sustained Allied attack. By May 1945, the Luftwaffe had effectively ceased to exist. Not because German pilots lacked courage, not because they lacked skill, because the system supporting them had collapsed completely, because mathematics had reached inevitable conclusion, because systems had defeated individuals with perfect efficiency. Erich von Steinberg learned this lesson at 29 years old, spent the remaining 39 years of his life trying to teach it to others, died believing most people still did not understand. He was probably right. We still tell stories about aces, about individual pilots with dozens of kills, about heroes who defied impossible odds. We tell these stories because they are satisfying, because they suggest individual excellence matters, that courage can overcome any obstacle, that heroism determines outcomes. Erich knew better. He knew courage cannot defeat mathematics, that skill cannot defeat production, that individual excellence cannot overcome systematic advantage, that wars are won by systems, not heroes, that modern warfare is mathematics dressed in mythology. This is the uncomfortable truth. This is the lesson that Erich learned in 90 seconds over occupied France in June 1943. This is what he carried for 39 years. This is what he tried to teach. This is what remains largely unlearned. Physics does not negotiate. Systems matter more than men. And the side that understands this first wins the war. Everything else is mythology we tell ourselves to make the mathematics feel less brutal, to make defeat feel more dignified, to make victory feel more earned, to make warfare feel less mechanical and more human. But warfare is mechanical, is mathematical, is systematic. Individual courage exists. Individual skill exists. Individual heroism exists. But they exist within systems larger than themselves. And when those systems are unequal, individual excellence becomes irrelevant. That was Erich von Steinberg's lesson. That is the lesson of modern warfare. That is the truth we do not want to hear. But truth does not require acceptance to remain true. Mathematics do not require belief to remain valid. Systems do not require acknowledgement to remain determinative. They simply are, and they simply win. Always.